Boom.
Hey, we have a winner.
Look at that. It only took us like 10 minutes to get to where we wanted to be. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Be coming.
So yeah, some absolute utmost professionals here. So thanks everyone for joining. Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. Welcome to the February rendition of CPUG, first of the year. So I hope we're all excited. We've got a few fun things planned for the rest of the year. But let's kick it off to the next slide, please, Wes. Just going to run through a few quick things, intros, a little quick member spotlight, a couple of small announcements we have, and then we'll get to the good stuff with Hunter, who's going to be sharing some really fun material. Next one, please. Wes, cool. Okay. So I think a lot of the names I think I recognize in the list there, but I think some of them may be new, it looks like, which is awesome. So welcome to you that are new. Great group of folks we have here, lots of kind of really passionate Power BI people, but CPUG itself stands for the Seattle Power BI User Group, and we are a collection of enthusiasts in the Seattle area, but with the geography of the Seattle area, we have kind of a west side and an east side being more Bellevue, Kirkland side of things, and Seattle itself is on the west side of the area. So kind of there's some other groups in different areas around here, and so our focus is mainly on the west side, and one day when we eventually get to be back in person, we will be hosting them geographically on the west side. And yeah, so we're just here to really just embrace the community and focus on encourage sharing of all the fun things around Power BI, what you're working on, kind of opportunities, growth, journeys, knowledge in the area. And then a reminder, I know that you touched on it briefly before, but for the benefit of those who are not able to make it today, we do record these sessions and share them out to the meetup group a few days after the session. So if there's anything you've seen on one of these, be it either this session or previous sessions that you want to share with some friends or family or anyone, colleagues who may appreciate the material, then definitely send them a link to our meetup group and then let them know where they can find some of the material. I think we've got pretty much every video still on there from the last several months worth. I think you went through that, Wes, a week ago or so, and there were a couple that were missing. So I think everything's there now. So yeah, again, like I said, if there's anyone that might benefit from this, then let them know. Next one, please, Wes.
Yeah, and we're going to start posting these to a more public space beyond just Meetup as well. So you can be on the lookout for that.
Perfect, cool. So just added this one in. I think it's kind of in the spirit of inclusivity and some of the things we've been talking about recently. Just reminding everyone to be aware of others, be friendly, patient, welcoming, respectful. I know you're all definitely very patient when we had some tech issues, so I do appreciate that. Just obviously be open to all questions of viewpoints, understanding of differences, and then kind and considerate. I think it's a nice thing to kind of just remind everyone that we can kind of focus back on these kind of ideals and really just have those be some of the bases for to build off of to be able to come here and share with everyone today. Next one, please, Wes. Cool. So getting involved, what is your forte? So you've done the first step, which is attend. So really appreciate that, everyone. Thanks for joining us. One of the things that is really meaningful to us is definitely feedback, right? It's a community. We want to be involved with the community, and the most important thing is, it's not necessarily kind of separation of the groups, right? We're all one community, and the only way we can make this better is by having feedback from people like you. So, if there's certain things you love, certain things that maybe are not your favorite on these, then please do let us know so we can improve these for the future and continue to evolve these to suit the needs of the community and everyone that wants to watch and be a part of this. A few options really if you want to be involved, again, other than providing that feedback. We would love to definitely have some speakers groundswell from within our community. That's always a preferred way to do these things, but if not, if there's something that you've seen come up recently in Power BI that's interesting to you and you've done some reading on it, or there's some new material that comes out with the monthly releases, there's topics that we can address as a community, and maybe you're not in a position to talk about those topics, but I'm sure there's someone in this community or someone that we can connect with who can come on and help out. Microsoft is making a really big push this year to emphasize the benefits of their communities, and so we've got a lot of support from them that's only going to increase as the year goes on. So, again, if there's topics that come up that you want to know more about, then, if we can't find someone that can directly provide that information, then we can touch base with Microsoft and get someone on to come and share some things later on this year around some of the growth in Power BI and other areas with the Power Apps and things. So yeah, I think that's obviously volunteer too, right? But I think that's kind of covered in the other ones anyway. So next one, please, Wes. Cool. So we wanted to kind of change things up a little bit here. I know we did a member spotlight back in November, I believe, with a couple of our folks, but we'd love to hear from anyone in the community. There's, in the spirit of CPUG, you've got this army of adorable childish pugs that would love to hear how you in particular got into Power BI. So I think we all have very, very different stories. I'm happy to share if we've got a few that if anyone's scared of jumping in and coming on the camera and that. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to jump in and share, maybe let's do a couple of these. Anyone out there that wants to come join?
This is Amin. I'm in North Texas. I'll go first since you don't have any takers. So 2 years ago, I started working at a small college here, and there wasn't really any reporting solution. And there actually was a rebranded Tableau thing that we thought we were going to spin up, but then that didn't work. And Microsoft has great partnerships for, I'm at a college, we're part of a consortium. The pricing was phenomenal. And so we're able to do Power BI Pro at way off the $10 a month. And now we can buy it for 40 or 50, department chairs, faculty members, and so on. And it's becoming incredibly productive. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
It's one of those tools that there is definitely lots of training out there that makes it easy. It's funny. I think some of the trainings I did back in 2015 or so, whenever this thing was still in 2015, 2016, some of them are still available, and it's funny how much of the content, conceptually is still valid, right? They did a great job building out initially and then building off of that. I'm happy to jump in if it kind of leads into me hopping into Power BI, but yeah, I jumped into an opportunity with a new consulting company back in 2015 and left the world of management consulting and entered analytics and data consulting, and they just said, hey, there's this new tool coming from Microsoft, really recommend you jump into it. And then it was definitely a case of fake it till you make it, right? And then here we are 7-8 years later, and I've done a large number of Power BI deployments and worked with all different flavors of things. But I feel like it's funny that I think a lot of people that get into Power BI and kind of work with the tool and the landscape of Microsoft BI almost sort of fall into it. There's a lot of needs that come up that can just be addressed quickly, and so I think it's an awesome tool for that. Let's see. I think we've got time for one more. Anyone else want to share?
I started in Power Pivot, going way back, and then this Power BI thing came out, and it was just so much better. And it's just our company is kind of got it scattered all over the place. We've got people still skeptical what it is. Like I'm older myself. I was gonna say I'm not that young either, but some of the people they just scared of it. They're like, is that real graphs? So those are real numbers? Yeah, they're actually the same numbers that were in the financial system. They just look a little different. But we've got some really good people that bought in and think it's amazing. And you can be a superstar and really not do a whole lot, which is kind of nice. You do a little simple Power BI presentation. It's like, wow, So for me, I'm an accountant background, CPA original. So I go from that, and I don't like accounting all that much anymore. So I'm more or less an analyst, and it's much more fun than my last role in my life, I guess you might say. So that's me. That's my background.
Thanks, Aim. I'm sharing as well. Appreciate both of you. Cool. All right, Wes, should we jump on the next slide? Get some announcements done, then we can move on to the good stuff. Awesome. So yeah, just a couple quick things here. So this is our February meeting. Obviously, you're here. It's February. You get that. But we are working on moving back to our regular cadence. I think we had a couple months off with holidays and kind of timelines not matching up. So again, yeah, we are back to working on monthly meetings, and we've got some really fun stuff lined up. I don't think I can yet share who our March person's going to be, because it's not quite locked down, but we're working on finalizing that still. So should hear back on that in the next week or so. But I think one of the things that came out of our retro for last year is these alternate meeting times seem to work pretty well. Some lunchtime, some early evening, different time zones, different people, I think, but it seems as though the lunchtime seems to work for everyone. So, feel free to drop in chat, if lunchtime works for you, if the 5 p.m. Pacific works for you, 5:30 Pacific, whichever times. But we're going to be working on alternating those meeting times throughout the year just to make sure we can kind of capture the biggest audience. But yeah, like I said, if you've got a personal preference for timing, please let us know in chat, or even on Meetup. I think maybe we can get a poll going on there. But it seems like there's a kind of finding that good balance of meeting times will help out as we move forward in the year and continue to support you all. And then just one community announcement, a reminder that we do have the Meetup page itself. But within the Meetup page, we've got the discussions feature there too. So one of the things that particularly Wes had mentioned to me this week, and we kind of talked about in retro, was we've all got questions about Power BI, right? And there's always certain things that come up, be it we want to find answers on the community, we want to look at Stack Overflow, we want to look at all these different places for things, but often as with every complex tool, sometimes there's just no solution out there, right? And so you want to draw on the communities and the people around you to help out with that. So if there's a case where that comes up, then feel free to drop a question in the discussion board on the Meetup group, and I'm sure someone here, there's, like I said, 700 of us now in that Meetup group. So that's a huge wealth of knowledge that anyone can draw on. So I'm sure I'll be using that this year as I continue to support my clients with kind of new Power BI developments and things, and maybe even not just kind of questions for difficulties you're facing, but maybe even some new monthly features that come out every month that are particularly interesting. People want to see what people have been doing with those, then feel free to drop that into. It's really up to you all how to use that. But again, we're here just to support and facilitate the conversation, and even if we do know the answer, then maybe we can help there too. So all right, I think that's everything for announcements. Wes, do you want to take it from here with
Absolutely. Yeah. So our guest today comes to us from Slalom Consulting, where he operates.
The next slide there.
Oh, hey man, I'm trying for effect. Okay, I'm building.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, you take it from here.
Building. It's all good. So coming to us today, coming from Slalom Consulting out of the Emerge Group and Creative Leadership and Analytics, which I think is pretty darn cool, where he's been working on the creative analytics methodology, which is what we're going to hear about today. What you might not know about him is that he was also a UW grad, right? Husky, appreciate that. And oddly enough, if I read this right, in IPE, International Political Economy was right, which is the obvious degree that you get before going into data.
Totally,
right? First step was Expedia, where he operated as a market associate, and then after that he jumped into data and analytics consulting, where he has held the titles of creative director, of data artist. So as you can tell, one of the cool things about this individual who we're all looking at right now, it's like I'm hiding you backstage, is that he does an amazing job of merging data with art and design. And you can see a lot of that in his history. He was the primary creator and contributor to this book called Art on Data. And then also in his free time, he also does a lot of digital art. So this is something that I happen to have of his. But if you go out onto the interwebs, you will also see that he has other creative projects, including a number of things around Schitt's Creek that has brought him recent fame. So with that, I would like to hand it off to our guest, Hunter Barrett.
All right. Thanks, Wes. So I'm excited to be here, not only because Wes at this point is an old friend of mine, but it's good to see him kind of operating in these Power BI groups. I have a background in building dashboards, which Wes can attest to, but have always kind of like leaned creative with this stuff. which has made work pretty fun, right? Because I'm always kind of looking at things in a way that the teams that I operate on don't always look at things with that same lens. But it's proven to be really collaborative and really fun, and that's continued through my time at Slalom. So I joined the team about 7 months ago or so, and have really enjoyed the opportunity to work in and very closely with data and analytics groups. So people who use tools like Power BI, Tableau, and other kind of data visualization softwares out there. But then also have the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of our really talented and smart and nice design folks at Slalom. So experienced design, and trying to understand how that dual sensibility can not only improve the way that we use some of these big box BI tools like Power BI, but then also change the way that we think about data experiences more broadly. And so we talk about, and specifically I talk about data experience a lot at Slalom and what that means. And part of what I'm going to share today is very related to that, and I'm excited to jump in. So Wes, I'm going to share my screen, and I would like for you to be my verification that you can actually see what I'm putting up here. Can you see Creative Analytics Methodology, Cam?
Yes, I can.
Cool. So I want to introduce everyone to this methodology, but first, before I do that, I want to make an important distinction that exists and that is really important in the world of data and analytics and the work that we do, and that is this distinction that we're looking at. There is a difference in the world according to Hunter, and that's the world we're living in right now because I was asked to speak. In the world according to Hunter, there's a big difference between dashboards, or what we have on the left, and then kind of like ad hoc self-service analytics exploration that we do as analysts that's more on the right side. And the biggest difference, in my opinion, and in the experience that I've had building lots of dashboards and supporting analytics teams, is dashboards tend to be curated experiences that are servicing kind of large groups of people. They're addressing really widely asked questions at a given organization, and are very often treated as products. And we don't always think about the content we create in tools like Power BI as products, but very often they're treated as such, and they're released with versions and are really built around user groups, or ought to be, because their impact increases if they are. That as a piece of analytical content is very different than the types of things that we might make as analysts to explore, test, validate data, or to create content that can be helpful for ourselves in our work, for a team meeting that we have coming up, for a presentation that we have going on. It's stuff that we might save on our desktop and then throw away, as opposed to on the dashboard side, we might publish a dashboard and have it be available for 600 salespeople as they log in on Monday and determine what their priorities are. So to be super clear about what we're covering today, when it comes to the creative analytics methodology, it really focuses on that dashboards side. And while both are very valuable and really well executed by Power BI as a tool, it's really the dashboard side that I've spent the most time in. And so that's like the kind of the type of analytical content that I'm going to speak to. So the creative analytics methodology, kind of at a large 30,000 foot view, identifies 3 phases that are really important to not only developing these dashboards, but doing so in a way that's strategically aligned to the business, and in a way that prepares us to actually make our time in Power BI really efficient, so that we have things planned out, and we kind of know what we're building, and we know what the data structure needs to be when we jump into that workflow. These 3 phases, to get a little bit more granular here, are broken out into 14 steps. And this is something that I am creating in conjunction with a number of folks across the country, in fact, at Slalom. A couple of them I know are on the call. And they're really important to the way that we work with stakeholders, whether that's someone that is on our team that we're working with, maybe it's a manager that we have, maybe it's a different group that we're supporting, or in the case of Slalom, right, it's often our clients, right? It's really important that we're designing these dashboards for them. And the thing that I've said, and if I had a dime for every time I said this, I could probably, I don't know, buy myself a Chipotle burrito. If we're not designing for people when it comes to dashboards, I don't totally know what we're doing, right? Like I'm like, I don't know what we're doing if not that, right? So this idea that we would take a human-centered approach to the development and planning of dashboards, I don't see as a very controversial one, particularly as these tools like, again, Power BI and also Tableau and others gain traction in the market, gain traction at organizations, and really become widely used. It's important that we keep the users in mind. And so that's what this creative analytics methodology is really designed to do. And it's a really collaborative effort. And I mentioned at the beginning that when it comes to Slalom and putting this together at Slalom, there's a lot of folks that have contributed to this, not only analytical folks that have worked in data and analytics and are experts in tools like Power BI, but also people that work in experience design, right? That think through some of these user-centered challenges in a different way, but in ways that can really effectively and productively contribute to the way we think about dashboards and how we make them. So I want to start this conversation by kind of going through each of the steps. I'm going to go relatively fast because we're a little short on time, but I wanted to kind of illustrate the way that we at Slalom understand these steps and how we can create really tangible artifacts that help us move through the steps. And so we'll start with a line and we'll kind of move our way through. I'll also say that given my relatively short tenure at Slalom, this is a methodology that's still in the works, right? So this is something that we're kind of like still working on, and I think always will be refining and making better. And so as we move through this, there are kind of like some gaps as I'm kind of leading discussions with our DNA and XD folks to come up with the best way to really articulate and document these different steps. So when it comes to a line, as an example, we have our 6 steps. And the first one is identify stakeholders and users. We then move into conducting interviews and drafting business questions. We have a conduct user interviews and refine business questions based on user needs, gather stakeholder feedback on refined business questions and finalize, a complete documentation, which is kind of a culmination of steps 1 through 4. And then finally, some initial requirements around data, the ingredients to the recipe, if you will. So what I want to do is do a little zoom in of each of these 6 really quickly to help like kind of illustrate why each one matters and how it's helpful. So the first step is identify stakeholders and users. And the reason why I think this is a really important thing to do right out of the gate is we sometimes confound those groups, right? And sometimes users and stakeholders are the same, but more often than not, I see kind of this Venn diagram, right? Where there's kind of like the people that are in charge of or are responsible for whatever is being built. And then we have our user group, which is usually larger, different, and more diverse in terms of the things that they're focusing on or care about. And so right at the beginning of a project, if you're out to build a dashboard that, again, is going to kind of act like a product and service a lot of people, it's very often useful to differentiate between those 2 groups to better understand who they are, how big they are, and kind of the positioning that they have at the organization. So that's something that we recommend doing. Next, we have a stakeholder interview, which is kind of like a template that looks like this. This is really helpful as we get, again, like aligned on the project. We look at analytical tool details, so what we want out of the dashboard. We have a section for data considerations where we're talking about, again, those kind of like pieces of the ingredients to the recipe, if you will, and then some organizational context, right, to understand who this will serve, what groups they serve, and how to kind of better understand them and their priorities. There's also kind of this, again, draft of business questions. It's relatively straightforward, right, where we have an opportunity to actually state the business questions that we care about, look at the associated metrics, who they serve, and also the actions that we want people to take. This is another really useful one, right? Because I can't tell you how many dashboards I've like consulted on where people just kind of describe it as, well, this is informative or this is descriptive. And generally speaking, if we're going to go through the effort of creating a dashboard, it's a really good best practice to think about the action that someone should take after gleaning the insight that they are. right? So this is a really good reminder to do that and to document it. The user interview, as you can see, is slightly different than that of a stakeholder, right? So a stakeholder is someone who might be running the project or working in conjunction with an analyst to create it. But the user interview is different in that it's thinking about the expectations that users have, what they actually ideally want to get out of the tool, and any kind of like other features and functions that they see as important, but that can sometimes be overlooked or kind of assumed to not be important by a stakeholder. Again, the draft business questions, this step goes back to this artifact where we can kind of refine things based on what we learned from users. This plan summary is a really good way to kind of bundle everything up. So based on kind of how much individuals value and want the kind of documentation that this offers, this is something that I've done, and it's also something that I've skipped just based on the project and the people that I'm working with. But it is kind of a nice like bow around the align phase. And then finally, we have just a simple list of the fields that we know we're going to need. So again, this list is kind of backed into the business questions that we have. And is an important thing to start thinking about right away as we wrap up this align phase. I mentioned this before and kind of want to hit on it again. So really high impact analytics are going to be human centered. And what these artifacts and the things that we use at Slalom and the kinds of conversations that we try to have make sure that the dashboards that we're working hard to create are in fact human centered. And doing so in this way actually allows a lot of our customers to rinse and repeat some of the best practices that we have, and creates a really, I've seen it create a really transformational change in the way that kind of analyst teams work in and amongst themselves, but also collaborate and communicate with groups within their organization that they serve. So from a align perspective, right? We have a lot of these kind of filled out. And as I move through the other phases of this, we have design next, and you can see that a lot of these pieces are still coming together. So as I've kind of been collaborating with data and analytics folks, and then the XD side, the experience design, it's been really great to get people's insight about the way that these steps should ideally be executed, documented, and communicated, whether it's within a team or with like an external group that we're working with. So to color this in a little bit, what I wanted to do was look at some specific parts of this methodology and give you a little example of something that I recently worked on. Because I think, it's one thing to talk about these templates and how they are useful, right? But to really see them in practice, I think helps demonstrate the value that they provide and the clarity that they can drive in and amongst teams. I'll also say that, there are certain projects where maybe steps 1 through 3, 8, 9, 12, and 13 are really useful, and the others aren't as appropriate, right? So one of the things that I always try to keep in mind when I'm building frameworks or building kind of systems where people can use them to improve their work or to just assist folks is to keep in mind that like it's hard to know what exactly each dashboard will require, what each team needs, how every team likes to communicate or likes to work. And so a lot of this is highly modular and lets people kind of pick and choose what is most appropriate for them and the work that they're pursuing. So I want to start by talking about how CAM helps organizations and how it's directly related to strategic impact, right? And then the relationship that has to just analytics broadly, right? So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the stated goals on this recent project that I did. And you'll notice that this particular organization actually used Tableau, but I think that's absolutely 100% interchangeable with Power BI, right? So when we think about these goals, I think they resonate and they are applicable and transferable to any kind of analytics group that is kind of, has their hands on these big box tools, wants to make them better, and wants to have a higher impact, right? So the stated goals were to create more strategic reporting, to strengthen the analytics community, in this case, those who are using Tableau. And then the third was to improve the visual and user experience design across reports. So when we think about Align, I want to go through steps 1 and 4 and kind of show you how those unfolded with this particular project. And what you can see here is that we went through the effort of saying who are the stakeholders, who are the users, and the conversation started with people, and it should, right? We made a kind of a distinction between them, and got a lot of organizational context around who are the people that were helping guide the project versus those who had used the actual dashboard. And we got a lot of good feedback that was a kind of a new experience and a new conversation that changed the way the dashboard was planned. And now you can see, as we move into step number 4, right, where there's these business questions, we had a lot of interviews with stakeholders and users that led up to this, but you can see how this business question template really kind of got larger and more robust. And this is a really good opportunity to qualify these questions with data, right? So here are our questions, right? How are key metrics performing compared to targets? How is efficiency for monetization metrics changing over time? And how is viewership changing, right? So these are, these are descriptors and things that people say a lot, that particularly business stakeholders say a lot, like how are things performing? Are things efficient? What's happening over time? All of these things need to be qualified and teased out a little more. Like, what does it mean to perform? What are the key metrics that are associated with performance, with efficiency? And when you say over time, what kind of granularity matters to the data that we're talking about? Are we talking about month over month? Are we talking about year over year? Are we talking about like minutes throughout an hour or hours throughout a day? So like all these things can be different based on the organization and the type of analytics that matters. And this is a really good way to tease out those specifics so that we don't have to deal with that down the road when we're building our data models and dashboards. One of our Slalom folks has used this a number of times on her projects. This is Alyssa. Alyssa's one of my favorites. And she says the Align phase guides create a standard process flow while still being flexible enough to adjust to specific project situations. And that's a really kind of like nice summary of what these are designed to do. When it comes to design, I want to focus on step 7 and 8. So this looks at kind of moving from a bullet pointed list of things that we have in here and requirements that we've heard, business questions that we know matter, and then start to think about things in a more spatial capacity, right? And what we did was we took our questions and we explored ways to communicate those questions and specifically the answers to those questions in visual ways, right? And there's always a balance to this, right? Where you want to ground the conversation in reality, but you also want to like know what's possible and always keep in mind what's possible. And again, really like ground it. Like what do I know I can build in Power BI? But then also we want to leave things open enough so that non-technical people can offer creative ideas and think about how these tools could be used to really benefit them. So it's a really nice bridge between kind of the technical and the non-technical, is taking things out of an kind of always digital or always like kind of software development space and making it a little bit more collaborative and approachable. This should always be centered on business questions, right? Because we don't want or need visualizations that don't contribute to answering the strategic business questions that we've defined. And so going through that Align phase and then jumping into design is a really good way to focus drawing and to just make that more effective and efficient. Drawing to explore visualization types is different than drawing wireframes. And I think that both are really useful. But this kind of time-lapse video that we have here is a good example of how we can take visuals that we've conceptualized and we can move into kind of a traditional frame that we know dashboards or tools like Power BI and Tableau are designed to have us kind of fit in this rectangle, or sometimes in a mobile view, right? But we can move into that frame and say, how do we want to lay these things out? What are their positioning to each other? What's an aspect ratio that's going to work well for the specific visualization type that I have? Where do I want to put filters? And and how do I want to position these things and lay them out while keeping in mind end users? And so this is something that we might come up with, right? Is a wireframe that looks something like this. This is not a wonderful piece of art, right? This is just a visual communication tool that helps us get the job done. Oksana is someone that I work with. She's also a slalomer, and she says, I'm a firm believer that wireframes have to be done, and using business questions to drive wireframing is incredibly helpful. Provides context for what people need and directly ties users to the end product. I know what I'm designing is helpful. That last piece I think is really important, because at least as someone who has spent a lot of time in tools like, again, Power BI and Tableau, and who still does, I really like knowing that how I'm spending my time is going to help get something done. And going through the align and design phases helps me feel like I have a really good plan in place, and that I know how to serve the organization or person that I'm serving. When it comes to develop, I want to take a look at step 13, which is really focused on creating kind of that polished dashboard. And when it comes to improving the kind of visual or user experience design elements of a dashboard, sometimes it can be really hard to know where to start. And so what we have at Slalom, and one thing that I think would be great is kind of a takeaway from this call, Wes, maybe you can help me with this, is to get this list in people's hands, right? So this is kind of like the list of things to think about. If you have a dashboard that you've created and you have an hour or even a half an hour, right, to move it from like a C+ to an A, what are some really quick things you can do? Saving time with consistent, repeatable processes is real, right? Like, when you have a process in place for how to evaluate your work or how to think about the either design or user experience elements, if you can do it in the same way every time, it becomes a much lighter lift and is a really kind of quick way to capture more value within a product like Power BI. This is an example of kind of where we are with this dashboard, and you can see that it again, like, doesn't reflect all of the kind of defaults that may exist in the tool or in the software, but kind of brings things into a new space. Another thing that I want to do kind of immediately after these next couple slides is look at an example in Power BI as well, to kind of demonstrate how transferable a lot of these principles are. There's also an opportunity to put together a style guide, right? Which is actually the thing that I'm going to show with this Power BI example. Avery, from another slalomer from the Orange County office, says, the style guide helps drive a cohesive look and feel for our clients in a very easy and repeatable way. Teaching our clients how to design their dashboards using CAM elevates their insights and highlights important KPIs that would otherwise get lost in translation. So again, from like a soup to nuts perspective, this is what kind of the methodology looks like. It's a really interesting thing to watch teams begin to use this and move through it very quickly. And just as kind of to kind of bring this full circle, right? When we think about those goals of creating more strategic content, bolstering a data visualization community, and bringing visual and UX design to tools like Power BI, all of the artifacts in this system are geared toward doing that. So to the extent that kind of we at Slalom can represent that and we can help you do that, we want to, we're able to, and we're really excited to have conversations like that. What I want to do now, before I know we want to jump into a Q&A, was look at an example of a data viz style guide. So this is an external tool actually that I created, so it will soon be kind of available on the World Wide Web, which is very exciting. And what this does is it uses, again, that 7 kind of principles baseline to say, this is what these principles are and what they mean. This is a before and after of like what a Power BI dashboard could look like. This is the before, and these are all of the kind of areas of opportunity that exist based on like what we're currently seeing here. And then it goes through each of the 7 and it shows the new dashboard and says, what were the changes that were made and why are those changes value adds to the kind of the user experience of this? And although there are kind of there are inherent limitations with Power BI, there are inherent limitations with Click, there are inherent limitations with Tableau, right? Like these are not custom built visualizations that we're talking about here. And so there are parameters that we want to live in, but these tools can do a lot. And I think that like one of the things that I've seen in kind of my career in working with these tools is Power BI, and this is why I was really excited to talk about this to this group. Power BI sometimes has like the reputation, or people make the assumption that it's like less design focused, or it doesn't have as many bells and whistles as Tableau does. I'm not like totally convinced of that. I think that it's different, and that there are kind of different capabilities that it offers, and different levers to pull when it comes to designing content. But there's a lot of really fun things you can do in Power BI, and ways to kind of like customize things with either like visuals that you poured in, or just like leveraging some of like the really basic elements that Power BI offers. I also think there's something about the austerity and simplicity of a lot of the Power BI native elements that can make for really nice layouts that I think are kind of otherwise hard to achieve. So all that is a kind of plug for Power BI, and the fact that I believe in the product and think it offers a lot of value. With that, I know we have just like a few minutes left, and Wes, I told you, I promised that I was going to leave some time for Q&A, so I'm going to stop talking. I don't know, Wes, do you want to like ask people if they have questions? How do we want to do this last 7 minutes here?
Yeah, so we haven't had any questions come through in on the chat, but if anyone wants to come off mute, ask some questions, feel free to. And I'm gonna give you a few seconds to think about that, to think about your questions. I don't know about anybody else, but as soon as somebody says, does anyone have any questions, or what are your questions, my mind immediately goes blank. I'm like, wait, what were we talking about? I'm supposed to ask things about, like, I could have questions like just coming the whole time, and then as soon as it's asked, I'm done. All right, we got Ben. Ben, you want to?
Hey, Hunter, are you going to be able to provide this slideshow to us, or is it going to be posted anywhere?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that for sure. I think it also sounds like we're going to have a recording of this online. So I think between those two, that'll be like a really nice resource for folks. The other thing that we can do is, and I mentioned this earlier, is particularly, if I can find it, this checklist, I think, is something that we can we'll actually be able to send out like as a PDF if we'd like.
Great.
I think that'll be a really it's proven to just be a really transferable and handy thing for folks that people like to have around, and we've gotten really good feedback on. So yeah.
And I have one other question.
Sure.
And it was just for clarity. When you were saying going through the design phase, who's doing the design? And when we're talking about the visuals, how are you picking out which visuals? From our side, and the way we've always done it, the data analysts or data scientists determine the visuals, and then the designer fits it in as it needs to be an aspect. How, for clarity, how is it that you guys are doing it?
Sure. So I think, and this is like the worst answer ever, but I'm going to fill it in to make it not the worst answer ever. So it sort of depends on the team makeup and kind of where a company is, or where an organization is with their comfort around data visualization. So organizations that are new to a product like Power BI, which is very visual, right? It's very visual forward, and is very different than some of the kind of conventionally rolled out pivot tables and kind of tabular analysis that has dominated analytics for the last 40 years or so. It can be hard to move into a really spatial and visual space. So when it comes to choosing visualizations, it's a really organization specific decision, because and that's where the human centeredness of this comes in. So let's say we're building a dashboard and I am learning about our users, and I have the wherewithal to ask about the users and how and their comfort level with visual analytics, bar charts. Do they currently have charts that are highly visual? Are they using mostly crosstabs and tables? Those questions are really important when selecting visualizations. Generally speaking, what I have seen is whoever is kind of developing in Power BI, they know what's possible in the product. And so they're really well positioned to say, XYZ chart is a really good option, not only for the question that we're answering, but for the user group that is consuming the content. The thing that I've seen that's really common is that a lot of people are consuming data in kind of a cross-tab format, which is fine. But I think that in some ways it leaves some of the value that Power BI has to offer on the table. So to the extent that the folks that are using Power BI to develop dashboards, to the extent that they can enhance tables or incorporate like data bars, perhaps like either shapes or icons or like color indicators right into tables to kind of begin to tiptoe an organization toward a more visual space, that can be a really useful thing. Honestly, I could talk about that for a whole nother hour in another session on how to like move an organization from a strictly tabular view into a highly visual one. But it really is a gradual kind of process. And it is one that really has to be made around, like those are decisions that have to be made around the users and the people that are gonna like get in there and consume the data. Does that answer your question, Ben?
Yes, thank you very much.
Cool.
Good, and now we have a topic to book you for in a few months, Hunter. So we have 1 minute, and we basically have 2 remaining questions. So I'm going to see if we can cover off on them. So Fernando was asking whether or not you had any finished examples. So
Sure.
if you want to just pop those up on the screen.
Yeah, so this is a finished example. So this would be like kind of one of the reporting suite that we did. And then also this is a finished example. So this is kind of like that before and after, right? And again, I could spend an hour talking this deck and talking about all like the changes that we see between this left-hand dashboard and the right. To be super clear, these are the same. This is the same data and the same dashboard. And a number of decisions were made to make the dashboard more usable, more easily understood, and more engaging and more visually differentiated.
Awesome. So we did have one more question, but I think that individual may have dropped off because we have already hit the time. People are like, now I got to go back to work and go to another meeting. So with that, I think we can close out. Hunter, thank you so much. This is incredible stuff that I know I apply to my work all the time, and it's amazing how all of those miscommunications that I used to run into have been cleared up because of this methodology. We hope to have you back, but yeah, thank you so much.
Good to be here. Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be posting this probably publicly. You will see it in about a week. See you later.
Cool. Yes, thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.